Where and when were you born?
So I'm 15 years old. I was born in 2004, and I'm an only child. And I was born in rural Connecticut.
Uh-huh. And what month? I'm interested in your astrological sign.
December.
Are you Sag?
I don't know anything about
What
astrology.
December what?
December 4th.
Yeah, you're a Sagittarian. It's interesting because I interviewed a young woman from Australia, from Sydney, who is a only child and Sag. So we're seeing a mini pattern here. I just talked with her today. Um, what are three words to describe you for someone who doesn't know you, your character?
I always find these things hard because how do you describe like a climate activist in 3 words? I'd say, well, I'm scared, which is the reason why a lot of us are doing this, but I'm also hopeful and I'm determined. And that's why instead of just giving it all up, I'm out there organizing, doing strikes, putting things together, building the movement.
Okay. And when did you first start realizing that climate was a problem, not just some kind of distant issue, but a real problem for today?
Very, very recently. I think only last year did I really start grasping just how bad the climate crisis is, but more than that, like how how much it is the fault of greedy corporations drilling beneath our soil and taking away our futures, and not the fault of me when I forget to recycle something.
Right. I know you make that point. When I researched you that a lot of people feel kind of guilt if we fly in an airplane or buy drive in a car, even a hybrid car, and that it's true that individual actions add up, but on the scale of thing, it's the oil
Yeah.
companies and the insidious thing about them is that they control with their money. They have a lot of lobbying power over governments
Yes.
and over information processing and release. So they have enormous power, and
Yeah.
yeah. Um, but you said that you're hopeful, and in the face of a president till I think very recently has been a climate change denier,
Yes.
Bolsonaro in Brazil, Morrison in Australia, and on and on. How can you be hopeful?
That's a very good question. I think, well, one, it really helps to be surrounded by these like amazing, talented, brilliant, passionate kids. And it makes me angry that like all this talent and passion is going into fighting the climate crisis instead of into all the things that we could be doing being a normal teenager instead of, I don't know, fighting for the survival of the planet. But just like seeing this movement, seeing how much power we have, how much we've built, I think, I mean, one of my favorite chants is I believe that we will win. Because sometimes we just have to believe it to keep going.
Mm-hmm. And I read somewhere that Trump recently claimed that he was an environmentalist. And because
Well,
it's a big issue in this election, and it's, as you know, for the first time it's one of the top issues that candidates are being asked about, although they weren't in the recent Democratic debates. And so because it's a popular issue, he's decided, oh, well, I'm an environmentalist and I make legislation and executive orders that allow coal plants to dump their waste into water, and I get out of the Paris Agreement,
well,
but I'm somehow an environmentalist.
no, no.
So what organization did you find that seemed the most effective to make change? Because we have to work in groups to make real change, I think.
So I do most of my organizing with Fridays for Future. I co-lead Fridays for Future Massachusetts, and I do a lot of work on the national level, and I work with a lot of Fridays for Future international people. I also have worked with the Sunrise Movement in America, which is a youth-led movement to stop climate change and create millions of jobs in the process. You'll probably know it as the yellow one with the yellow signs. They're amazing. And I also work with the Youth Climate Strike. I think that I don't want to say that any one organization has been more effective than any of the other ones. I do know that Fridays for Future International has been pushing all this stuff and giving us all that momentum, but I think that each organization has something special to bring to the table, and we need all of them to create change.
So what was the third group? I haven't talked with anybody from that you mentioned.
Youth Climate Strike. It's a group in America that's focused a lot on like policy, like progressive policy legislation and organizing deep strikes.
Mm-hmm. And from your understanding of the debates, is there one candidate? I know that Sunrise endorsed Bernie Sanders. Do you agree with that, or do you think there's one candidate who's been closer to the Green New Deal and doing something real for climate?
I don't want to have like my political views put in the book, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What the thing that bothers me the most is that 49% of Americans approve of Trump, and in terms of making a difference for climate activism, that's got to be the main issue in the U.S. And so I wondered, in terms of the work you've done, what works best to appeal to like a Trump supporter?
When I'm like reading up on theories of change and the best way to organize a community to bring change, it is like it has been proven throughout history that it's more effective to talk to like a moderate person, to someone in the middle, than to talk to someone completely on the other side. It's more effective to talk to a passive supporter to turn them into an active supporter, and to talk to people in the middle and turn them into passive supporters. So I do think that like focusing on appealing to like one Trump supporter, it takes a lot of energy, and I feel like, oh, while that is good and while these conversations are important, that energy can be better spent elsewhere.
Well, that's interesting. What I see most often used as a tactic in activist groups recently is tell the story. So that if you just talk about scientific facts, people go meh, 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 meh. But if there's stories about I live in Louisiana and my house was flooded because of climate change and sea rise, that's what gets to people. Do you agree with that approach, or what do you think is effective?
I think people are touched by stories, and I think one of the reasons why the climate movement has spread so quickly was because of telling the stories of youth activists like me, like Greta, and telling stories of like people like on the front lines of the climate crisis. And that's why I really hope the climate movement can do more in terms of art, because it has just been shown over and over through history. Art is how we get to people. But I do think that it's very, very important to remember the science. Like, as climate activists, like, we're not asking the world to listen to us. We're asking the world to listen to the science.
Greta makes that point over and over and over again.
Yes. But it's very important to keep saying it, because when we're coming up with solutions to the climate crisis, they need to be just. They need to be founded on justice and on science.
Right. So when you are on a strike, like a Friday, what kind of comments do you get from passerbys? What do they say?
I'm lucky to live in Massachusetts, where if I'm standing in the street holding a sign, I'll get like waves, and people will generally be nice to me. I mean, I think it's a common sentiment around activists everywhere that if we're standing in the street handing out flyers to people, it's very frustrating because no one wants to take your flyer. And the activist experience, you just have to live with that. I do have friends who live in places that are a lot more hostile to youth activism and to people that want to do something about climate change. And I really hope that as Fridays for Future, we can support them better because it's really hard.
Yeah. Um, the young woman I was talking with earlier today from Australia said they've noticed there's a tactic where people will get almost in front of them and then they'll cuss at them or make some negative comment and then move on. So there's like this strategy of the negative people.
Yeah, I've never experienced that, but
Interesting.
I have friends who had, and it's not good.
Uh-huh. Um, is your main organizing tool with the three groups that you mentioned face to face, like when you're on a Friday strike, or do you virtually organize mainly, or how do you work together?
Most of our organizing is done online. I do some organizing locally, but even then, we live across the state. It's often not accessible for us to all get to the same place. And this is the age of the internet. We have these tools, so most of my organizing is done over conference calls and over Slack. If I pull up my Google Calendar for any given day, I'll have this call, this call, this call, this call, this call, because that's just what my life looks like. And even without that like face to face interaction, even without like being on a call with someone, there is still a lot of value in messaging them and in planning stuff over texting over Slack.
Mm-hmm. How do your parents feel about your activism?
My parents wish I focused more in school, but I think that's expected. But really, the point of school is to study for your future. But I don't know what my future will look like. I don't know what the future of the earth will look like, and I think that this is like my duty to the earth. This is like it's just so much more important than some a material than the material possessions I get from going to a nice college and getting a fancy job will ever be. But they have noticed that I have been happier after I got into activism. I think that's also a really common sentiment because like I'm actively doing something about these problems of the world. I'm physically there, striking, organizing, and I'm making that change. It's so rewarding, and they can see that, and so they support that.
Mm. Also, sometimes there's kind of a euphoria if you're in a march or with your like a group of people. It's really exciting, and
Yeah,
it's a good feeling to know that other people care as much as you do. If you had a dream college and dream major for college, what at this point what would it be?
I think going to Georgetown University would be really cool. I am studying like political science, environmental science, something like that, because I think that policy is how we create change, and I want to study political science because people power plus political power equals change. And but I also do think that by the time I'm out of college, it'll be too late. We need to be making these changes now. And Georgetown University in DC would be amazing because it is near the capital. It's where these things happen, but at the same time, local organizing is just as important as national organizing. There are a lot of schools right here in Massachusetts that have really great activist groups, and I'd honestly be happy with any of them because there's a lot going on in Massachusetts. Massachusetts, even though we're considered like a very liberal state, a state that's very good in climate change, there is so much wrong with our climate policy here and just in general how things work here that we need to be fixing. There are amazing college groups out there, and I want to be part of them.
Mm-hmm. When you are communicating with different activists throughout the country and throughout the state, roughly what percent are female?
That's a hard question. I'd say although percentage-wise most would be female, I do notice that female activists do take up less space, and male activists take up more space, and that's something we need to work on, like gender equity. Like we know the intersectionality between climate justice and feminism, but we need to recognize that in our own movement, and have male activists make space for female activists, have white activists make space for activists of color, and when we're fighting for climate justice, racial justice, gender justice, these things come, but we need to have them in our own movement, not be one, it's good, but also because when we make space for diverse voices, things get done. And we need things to get done very fast because we don't have much time left.
You implied that young men take up more space. Does that mean verbally monologuing, talking more, or take up more space in what way?
I'd say in any of them, and again, male activists are amazing. No shade against them. It's just something really good to keep in mind to make sure that female activists get the space they deserve.
In terms of being heard and listened to and that kind of
yes.
thing?
Yeah.
But if you were going to put a number, like in the Massachusetts groups of activists that you communicate with, roughly what percent are young women?
I'd say a pretty high percentage, like 80.
Oh, wow. One of the young women that I interviewed said she thinks part of what's going on is in high school, the coolness factor is it's not cool for guys to be an activist. It's somehow more accepted for young women to be activists, but I guess for guys, you're cool, you're in a band or you're an athlete or something like that. Have you noticed the coolness factor in high school?
I think I have, but I do want to say that activism is not an extracurricular. Sure, we can have activist clubs that we go to after school, but me and all my friends that have given up our hobbies to do this, we're not doing it because it's fun. We're not doing it to put on a college resume because honestly, there are probably better things that we could be putting on our resumes other than being on conference calls for 7 hours in a day. We're doing this because we're scared, because the world is broken and someone needs to step up and fix it. So, if someone is deciding between extracurriculars, I don't think it's right that activism, just equating it to something that you do for fun, something that you do for college resume, because it's just not the same. We don't do this for fun.
It's survival.
It is.
Yeah. I understand that. What do you organize in your high school? Is it a government public high school? What do you do in your own high school?
Yeah, so I did go to a public high school. I'm very privileged to go to a rather well-off one. For September 20th, you probably remember as the biggest global climate strike day in history. I organized a strike of around 1,000 people at my school, and it was really amazing to see everyone out there and do all that organizing. I don't really interact with organizers in my school anymore, but there is a climate movement brewing up right there in my own school. I'm glad that September 20th started that up, even though I don't really do much there anymore because I'm focusing more on stuff in my state. It's been really amazing to watch them.
And what was the best way to communicate with those 1,000 students? Was it social media, word of mouth, flyers? How did
all those? All of them. Everything. Every method of outreach is important.
If you were asked to give advice to someone else who wanted to get 1,000 people out of their high school, what would you say? Make sure you do da, da, and da.
I think that really depends on the high school, depends on the person, because the organizing scene in my town, in my school, is very different than the organizing scene halfway across the world. For me, start reaching out to organizations, reach out to anyone you admire, get as much advice as possible, build as many partnerships as possible, because there are so many groups that want to help you, you just need to seek them out. And I mean, I could go into specifics of like, this is the software you should use, whatever, but I think the most important thing is build that base of people, build a team of young organizers. You can divide up the teams however you want: media, communications, outreach, actions, logistics, fundraising, whatever you want. But build trust between them, team building, everything, because you will be working with these people. Make sure that there is that trust, there is that love, because we're organizing out of fear. But I really love the phrase "love and rage" because we're angry, but we do have that community, that connection. And I think that's the most important thing.
What I found in organizing is food is very important to get people to turn out. That always works. Food in a band.
Yeah.
There's a lot of discussion, and it's interesting to me because it was the same discussion in the second wave of the women's movement about structure, hierarchy. Do we want leaders? The second wave didn't like media stars. So I wonder if that's something that you've dealt with. How do we get things done without having a military hierarchy?
That's honestly been a question that a lot of us have been dealing with. In my opinion, so I have been in organizations that claim to be flat. And I'm putting that in quotes because I've read essays about how when an organization claims to be flat or tries to be flat, what emerges is a shadow hierarchy. There are people in charge, there are people that have more power than others, but because it's not established, because you can deny its existence, there's no accountability, no transparency, and things can get very bad.
The classic article. Do you know this one by Joe Freeman, "The Tyranny of Structurelessness"?
I think so, yeah.
It's an old, 60s article or something, but she says exactly that.
Yeah, and I think that the most important thing is whatever gets things done. I've also been in organizations that have this really, really extreme, rigid hierarchy that just, the maintenance of that hierarchy kept it from really moving forward and creating the change it wanted. And again, all these people really, really are amazing, and I think that the organizers can be super, super talented, but there needs to be a functioning structure in order to bring out that passion, that potential, all that change they want to make. I think there needs to be some form of hierarchy and structure because the most important thing is if you have leads, put checks on their power, make sure that everyone is valued no matter what, everyone has access if they need it, if they want it, if they deserve it, and just put structural things in place to make sure that the hierarchy does not get out of control, and that even if there's a hierarchy in name, everyone is valued, and everyone has the same opportunity to do all the work they want.
The way the second wave people approached it is rotate. Rotate who facilitates a meeting and who takes notes and that kind of thing. And that way people get experience doing different jobs. But on the other hand, some people are really good at public speaking and some people hate to public speak. So it seems to me to make sense. If you have somebody who's good at something and likes it, then let them do it.
Yeah, I do think if someone really, really wants to facilitate the meeting, but some other person has been doing it for a while, everyone should have a chance to do what they're interested in doing, if it makes sense. But again, all this stuff is really case by case. Organizers on the ground can honestly see what's best for them and what's most important. So yeah.
It seems like maybe Sunrise has the most centralized leadership in terms of different youth organizing groups, and it's organized in hubs, and there's a lot of communication back and forth. Do you think that's a fair statement or not?
I don't think think you can like measure which organization is the most centralized. I do think that centralization can sometimes work out really badly. For Sunrise, I mean, just look at it; it's working out pretty well. So I think honestly, it's how it's run, it's the people in it, and yeah.
Have you been to a Sunrise training?
I haven't, but I've worked a lot with Sunrise. I helped start up my school's Sunrise Hub, and while they're thriving on their own, and I'm working more with Sunrise National now.
In what capacity? In what way?
Um, I'm I'm being trained to be a Slack moderator, which basically means helping maintain the national Slack and that's like tech stuff.
So a Slack is what?
A Slack workspace is it's a way to communicate. Often businesses use it because how a Slack workspace works is there are different channels like art, finance, logistics, outreach, and then each channel is like a separate chat. And so it's very well organized. So each conversation happens in a specific category, and you can just look there. If you want to see something about social media, you look at the social media channel. If you want to look something about outreach, you look at that channel. And very easy search functions. And just a lot of things that help make it organized and help organizations run efficiently, which I think is important.
So if I want to do art for Sunrise, then I can go to the art channel and see what's been done, what they need, sign up to make a poster or a design or something, and then who gets back to me? How do we talk back and forth?
So I'm new to Sunrise National, and I'm pretty sure that's not how it works. I think take a local hub. Say you signed up to join a local hub, you probably filled out a Google form, and you probably checked art. If you checked art, then whoever is the art team lead would reach out to you, say, "Hey, let's have a call, just onboard you, tell you about what you would be doing, and then tell you like when our in-person meetings are, when our calls are, add you to the channel, and then give you some tasks." Or honestly, if you were already like part of a hub, you would just message that person, say, "Hey, I want to join," and they just get you in.
Mm-hmm. It seems to me that pictures and art, well, they're worth 1,000 words. So a lot of times a picture will kind of galvanize people. Like, oh, I'm thinking of the Greek indignados when they were having their uprising. There was a dog that was always there called Sausage, and Sausage kind of was galvanized people. This dog who is always in front lines, and I'm wondering if there's an iconic image that you think of in terms of climate activism. Probably Greta standing in front of the Reichstag with her hood and her sign. Is what visually speaks to you in terms of getting the message across?
I mean, Greta's been an icon. She's inspired so many people. I'm sure you've heard this. Greta is not the only climate activist that deserves attention, and there are so many young women of color that I inspire that I find
you
really inspiring, and but like when I'm like on the streets yelling, I'm not really thinking of Greta and those people I admire. I'm having images in my head of droughts and floods and food shortages and people dying. That's what I think of. And there's that grief that comes with climate activism. When you're chanting, you're thinking about all the things, like you're thinking about a beautiful future, but you're also thinking about a terrible one.
Mm-hmm. So when you're designing a flyer or poster to say we're going to strike on such and such a date, is there an image that you found grabs attention and gets the message across?
I think it really depends on what the event is for, which organization is doing it. I don't think there's like one specific image.
Okay. I think for some people, polar bears caught on ice floes was a big, powerful image. Um, but I don't know. I can't think of anything other than polar bears that was iconic in terms of photo ops.
Yeah. I do. I feel like environmentalism used to be about like, oh, look at the animals, but we've started to realize, hey, there are humans all being impacted by the climate crisis right now. There are people losing their homes. There are people dying. And I just I really appreciate that because I feel like that whole save the animals thing, it seemed a little whitewashed to me, a little like Western centric, and we're starting to realize like, hey, the global South is going through this. This is our fault. Let's do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. Um, in my experience with activism, one problem is who's the most pure, and people get into these purity ideological debates. Oh, you're not pure enough. And another problem is burnout. People get tired and drop out. And I wonder what you would see as the main issues that you deal with in organizing and how you cope.
So for purity, do you mean like who's more progressive, that kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
That's very, very hard. And if I'm going to be honest, I don't really have an answer. I think that the climate crisis should be above partisan politics. Republicans, Democrats, everyone will be equally drowned when the seas come up, you know? But obviously, people aren't seeing that. But I do think that alienating potential supporters of the climate movement because they don't have the same exact views as you, or maybe they just don't know as much as you, I think that's wrong. It's not productive, and I understand your anger, but we need to be getting their support, and we need to be talking to them, educating them, having conversations, listening, and not just being angry. As for burnout, I face that a lot myself.
I bet. Because you have school and homework and
Yeah,
SAT prep and all that too.
yeah. I mean, I've considered leaving the movement a few times because of just how crazy everything is, but we just gotta keep going because what else can we do? I do think that I started only recently I mean, you see all these things on Instagram, take care of yourself, self care, but like, it's never really sunk into me until recently when I realized, hey, this is a marathon, not a sprint. The movement will be better off if I get off the computer and go to sleep. And just advice for anyone who's like me who just wants to keep going and going and going and going and going. I understand that. I'm like that too. But trust me, if you want the movement to be better off, get off the internet and go to sleep.
Yeah, that's good
Stop
advice.
working and take a break.
Do you have siblings?
I don't.
That's another interesting pattern I'm seeing. It's only children. Um, so let me ask you about some people who are climate activists get a lot of verbal abuse online. And I wonder if you have to deal with that. I know, like Lily, who's 11 and in the Netherlands, her mother has to go through all their social media because she gets so much hostile, negative comments about being an activist. I wonder if you experience that or if it's not a problem.
I've had some things and just block, block, block. Try not to read these comments really. I struggled a lot because especially when I was younger, I really wanted to argue. I really wanted to fight back against these people because you're wrong and I'm right. I've gotten wrapped up into so many arguments that have been completely and utterly useless.
Oh,
So just don't engage. Just don't. And try not to even read that stuff if you can. But I don't have as many Twitter followers as she does, so I haven't had to deal with that as much.
oh, right. Why do you think your generation seems to me to be unique in the early age at which people start activism. You know, there's 9-year-olds and 11-year-olds, and you started when you were 14. What is there about your generation Z that enables that kind of leadership?
Because we have no choice. We're being shot in school. We're watching our future get ripped away before our eyes. We can't just stand back and watch that happen. We have the internet. We grew up with information ready to us at our fingertips. We have that power, and so we're going to use it.
So do you think if the internet crashed, for some goblin got into it and there's no more internet, that the movement would survive? Or is it like mainly enabled by, it is mainly enabled by social media, right?
It is. I think local organizing could still be done, but any national coordinating, you wouldn't have anything like September 20th ever again. Because we rely so heavily on the tools we've been given and learned to master that, like, it would be very, very hard.
Mm. Are your favorite social media Instagram and Twitter?
Ooh, that's hard. I have a lot of social media, like Slack is where all the work gets done. Like Instagram and Twitter is what I use to post about climate change. And then just like, there are fun sites that I just use to like take a break from climate activism and not read about climate change. I'd say I don't have a favorite, but Slack is probably the one I spend most time on because that's where we get things done.
I see. What about in school? What subjects are most interesting to you?
I really like history class. It's interesting to see like the roots of the climate crisis, like how deeply embedded the problems in our system are, and just like being able to study like how movements work, how rebellions work, how power gets shifted and changes is so important to activism. So I really enjoy, and I think it's really important to study that. Before I got into activism, I spent a lot of time writing, and although I don't really have time to pursue that as much as I would like because of all the time I'm spending doing this, I really do enjoy English class.
So are you saying that in your history class or poli-sci classes that they do discuss uprisings and social change?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Because when I was teaching history in high school ages ago, we just studied wars. You know, we did the Revolutionary War, War of 1836, Civil War, Spanish-American War, like that. That was what we mostly studied. So it's changed.
Yeah, it has.
Oh, good. So if you were projecting 5-10 years in the future, how do you see yourself? What will you be doing?
That's hard. 5 years in the future, I'd be 20, probably in college, working with activist groups, trying to get my school to divest, probably. Although I hope it had already done that by then because it's in 5 years. 10 years from now, I'll be like fresh out of school. Honestly, it's very hard to say where my path will lead. 6 months ago, I could not imagine being where I am right now. 1 year ago, being where I am right now would have blown my mind. So I really can't say.
In terms of how involved you are with national organizing and state organizing?
Yeah.
I want to go back to that question of hierarchies, because if you're working with a state or a national organization, there has to be some kind of structure, and you can't be rotating, facilitating if you're organizing on the national level. Is that an accurate statement or not?
I work with National on Fridays for Future. It's very loose and can often be problematic. Although I do want to say that National is in no way like at a higher level than local organizing is. Because the point of National is to support its local chapters. I think we have not done a good enough job with that, if I'm going to be completely honest. national can turn into this huge power grabbing thing like, oh, I'm this national person. I'm so cool. But that's not the point. You're useless. You are there to support your local organizers. If you're not doing that, you're useless. And the most rewarding, the most effective organizing I've done is within my own community.
That makes sense. But is it accurate to say that there is a certain kind of structure and hierarchy involved in a national organizing?
If I'm gonna be honest, I found at Fridays for Future USA's attempts to be flat, ineffective, and there is a hierarchy, and I have found it ineffective.
Because it isn't acknowledged?
It has started to be acknowledged, but I still think there is so much more we could be doing. There is so much more work that could be done. We could be giving so many resources to our local organizers, and we just aren't. And I hope that can change.
So what's holding back that kind of support that you'd like to see?
A lot of things.
Like?
I think a lot of it has to do with I do think that ideological differences are part of it because FFF, we do come from the most diverse political spectrum, and that's been hard to work with, but I think it is necessary. And just simple things like what do we value as Fridays for Future? What's important to us? But I think once that's sorted out, there's so much we can do.
That seems pretty straightforward. We value a environment where everyone can flourish. We value empowering people. Where is the question about values or the emphasis on certain values?
For example, we have leadership that people who do have more power than other people that are pretty white privileged people that that their ancestors have been in this country all their lives, saying, hey, as Fridays for Future, we don't fly. A lot of people that are immigrants or descendants of immigrants have found that hurtful especially as a core value because just sure, FFF Europe can do all that flight shaming, but we know that the climate crisis is not because I didn't turn off my tap. It's because of Exxon lying to the public for decades. And just having a white person who has had family living here all their lives telling you, hey, if you want to see your family, take a boat to China. It's just something that it's not right.
No, they probably would agree with that.
Yeah.
Anyway, it would be more polluting to take a boat to China than to fly, I would think. With what's used. Do you think of yourself as a feminist?
Yes, 100%.
That's really interesting because when I was teaching women's studies at the local university, for a while back, people would say, I'm not a feminist, but I believe in equality. And I don't hear that anymore. I don't hear I'm not, but. Do you?
Very little, because I think a lot of us have started to realize, hey, this is feminism, let's embrace it. We want equality for women, we want this, and we will call ourselves feminists because that is what we are.
Mm-hmm. In terms of understanding intersectionality of our ethnic backgrounds, our gender, our sexual preference, how we identify our sexuality or non-sexuality, do you think that is explored enough in the movement in the U.S.?
I think many activists and organizers have done a very good job of it, but there needs to be more. 80% of people most affected by the climate crisis are women. We know this, the intersectionality between gender and climate change. Just we see educational rates drop because of droughts. We see all of this. There, LGBTQ youth are so much more likely to be homeless, which makes them very, very vulnerable to natural disasters. I could go on, and we know these things, but we need to keep saying them over and over and understand them, and but not just within the movement. We need to be educating the public about this because it's so incredibly important, and people just don't. I don't think people really see intersectionality between issues. They say, oh, climate change, gun control, women's rights, blah, blah, blah. And they see them as separate boxes. And people need to realize, and people need to learn that these things are all related.
They are. Have you had any connection with the Never Again movement? I think I read that you were involved with them in some ways. The Florida, after the mass shooting in the Florida high school in Parkland.
No, not really. Where'd you read that?
I don't know. I'm reading a lot, so I'm sorry if I confused you. But are they active in Massachusetts?
Yes, actually, at my school, They were actually the ones that inspired me to organize for the 20th because after just seeing the work they did.
That's what I read.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just like after seeing the work they did after the Parkland shootings, I just saw like, hey, these kids at my own school can do this. I can do this too.
Interesting. And I'm thinking of David Hogues got into Harvard partly because of his activism. So I think this is going to help you. Is there anything else that you would like to throw out in terms of being an effective organizer, youth issues, anything that we haven't talked about?
Ask for advice. No matter how experienced you are, there are people with insights that you need. And listen to people, make people feel valued. But while you're doing that, be confident in yourself. You have done this, you have this experience, you know what you're capable of, and don't let people tell you otherwise.
Profound. Okay, thank you. I really appreciate this, and I hope you can go to bed now. Renew yourself.